The brain is so complex that you can learn an awful lot about a particular disease, a problem, a malfunction, and still not know yet how to fix it or prevent it. That's true about Alzheimer's disease. We first met Washington University Med School Alzheimer's researcher Dr. John Morris a few years ago. And even since then, there's been progress, good things to report. But the big breakthrough, still somewhere down the road. So joining us is Dr. John Morris, professor of neurology at Washington University School of Medicine, really one of the leading Alzheimer's researchers and experts in this country, if not the world. You've been doing this for 30 years, right?
Correct.
No effective cure, no treatment, no prevention in those years. It's got to be extremely frustrating, not only to you, but to everyone.
It is frustrating. On the other hand, we really only began to understand Alzheimer's disease in the 1980s. Up until then, you may remember there were a number of terms utilized to describe the illness: senility, hardening of the arteries. We didn't know what Alzheimer's disease represented. So in the past 30 years, we've gained a great deal of knowledge about the disease, but it has yet to translate into truly effective therapies. We lack that. It's a huge problem because the scope of Alzheimer's disease is relentlessly expanding.
So let's talk about what we do know, what you have learned about what is happening in the brain that it creates the problems that it creates.
So here's the idea. There are normal brain proteins that, as long as they remain normal, carry out their usual function, no problem. But in Alzheimer's disease, those proteins get somehow dysregulated. There's either too much of it produced or it's not cleared away properly, and so then these proteins become a problem. They can't carry out their usual function. Moreover, they start to clump together and they get deposited in the brain tissue, and then that starts the inevitable process that brain cells are going to die. As brain cells die, then ultimately what those cells should have produced in terms of normal memory or normal judgment gets interrupted, and the signs of Alzheimer's dementia become apparent.
One of the things you've been looking at is how early that begins and how maybe late we recognize the damage that's been done.
I think that's one of the big advances in the past 10 years is we've come to accept that what we all consider when the term Alzheimer's disease is used is the affected person. They're losing their memory and thinking, they can't function. That probably is the end stage of a process that's been going on for decades. There are at least 2 decades in which the brain changes of Alzheimer's are occurring, but there are no symptoms as of yet. And the reason this is so important is it gives us a new time that we might intervene with some therapies in this clinically silent phase to see if we can prevent the dementia symptoms from occurring.
Can you detect it early enough at this point?
Another big advance in the past decade is that we now have markers of the brain changes of Alzheimer's disease that we can analyze in certain fluids that the body produces, or even image with specialized imaging modalities. So yes, we can evaluate the fact that the brain has the Alzheimer lesions in a person whether or not they have the Alzheimer's symptoms.
If you were to do that with me and you saw the early signs, is there something you could do to slow, to prevent, to cure?
So we don't know the answer to that question, very important question, but we've started to try to get the information to determine whether that's achievable. In 2012, here at Washington University, the first ever prevention trial began in Alzheimer's disease, in a very special group of people who have Alzheimer's disease because they inherited a gene mutation that causes the illness. So we know that if they carry the mutation, that they're destined to develop Alzheimer's disease, and usually at a very young age. So we can take these mutation carriers prior to the age at which they develop symptoms and administer therapies that we think target those proteins I mentioned earlier to see if we can prevent or at least delay the onset of symptoms.
No, we don't know if those therapies are effective yet. That's going to take some time to find out.
It will take some time, but the point is the studies have begun.
Again, you've been doing this for decades now. There's been a long progression of learning what Alzheimer's is, what it does. Now you're moving into this phase. We're always wanting to know, are we on the verge of something? Are we about to break through? Are we going to see it in my lifetime or your lifetime?
Well, so I'm optimistic, but I'm realistic. I don't think that this is going to happen in the next year or 5 years. It's going to take 10, 15, 20 years. The point is, we had to start sometime to treat people who lack symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. Their memory and thinking are perfectly normal, but we think because we have detected that they have the brain changes of Alzheimer's, that they're at very high risk of developing the symptoms in the next several years. So let's intervene now with these experimental therapies and see if we can prevent or delay the onset of Alzheimer's dementia.
And we have a large aging population. I guess my question is, we hear a lot about cancer research, heart disease funding, all of that. Alzheimer's, I wonder if Alzheimer's just wasn't accepted as a part of aging and not really seen as a disease that needed to be attacked in the same way that a cancer that might kill a woman in her 30s was being attacked.
I think that's a very salient observation. Some people believe that Alzheimer's disease is part of normal aging. It is not. It's a disease. Yes, it's associated with aging, but not everyone who is 80 or 85, 90, 95 has Alzheimer's disease. So it's not the same thing as aging. It's possible to live long in life and keep all your memory and thinking intact. Now, you mentioned terrible illnesses such as cancer and heart disease and stroke. It's often not appreciated that the number of deaths caused by those illnesses are decreasing proportionately from where they were 10 or 20 years ago, because we have developed effective therapies or prevention strategies for these terrible illnesses. But Alzheimer's disease, of all the leading causes of death in the United States, is the only illness in which the number of deaths are increasing, because we haven't developed adequate therapies to really treat the disease.
The cost of this, I mean, the personal, emotional toll is tremendous. But there's also a dollars and cents cost that we're all going to bear as more of us get old, a huge baby boomer population. That has to be a factor that at some point people are going to have to take a look at. How are we going to, I mean, thankfully we're looking for something that might lead to prevention. But in the meantime, we're really talking about taking care of a lot of people in serious decline.
So again, you've really described the dilemma, and many people think that Alzheimer's disease is benign. Well, what do you expect? He's 85. Of course, he's going to be a little forgetful. But it's a terrible illness for anyone who has been through it with a loved one. It's just terrible. You've lost the person who you've known all of your life. They're no longer available to you, and ultimately they require great physical care as well. So the hidden cost of Alzheimer's is not just the tragic loss of memory, thinking, and independence of the affected person, but how it affects the family members who have to care for that person. In terms of financial considerations, it is an extraordinarily expensive disease because it goes on for 7 to 10 years. It takes a long time. So it requires all this funding to try to care for it now, but also it's only going to get worse because people are living longer and longer, and more people are living longer and longer, and the number one risk factor is Alzheimer's, for Alzheimer's disease is aging. So we're just going to see more and more and more. It's going to bankrupt our healthcare system trying to care for all of these individuals affected by the illness.
One of your jobs is to look for money to fund the kind of research you're doing. Has that picture been changing?
Primary source of research funding comes from our National Institutes of Health, and it's essentially been a very flat budget for the past 10 years. There have been some efforts in recent years to increase funding for Alzheimer's disease, but the increased funds have gone to very specific projects. They haven't diffused through the field. And the concern that many of us have is those of us who started 30 years ago have been training and mentoring junior investigators to take over the next generation, but they see how dire the funding situation is and they move to another illness or another area, so they don't stay in the field. So I'm very concerned about how we're going to continue to keep young, bright investigators interested in solving the problem with Alzheimer's disease.
Again, it's difficult, if not, I won't say impossible, difficult to reverse the effects of Alzheimer's. For you, the real hope is in early detection and prevention.
Correct. We haven't yet had any substantial way to slow the course of the disease once the symptoms appear. Once it appears, it inevitably progresses and always ends in death about 7 to 10 years after symptoms begin. We always want to try to help people with developing therapies once they're in the symptomatic phase, so see if we can slow it or halt it. But perhaps, as with heart disease, perhaps the better strategy is to try to prevent it. We'd much rather prevent a heart attack by lowering cholesterol and stopping smoking and treating diabetes than wait till the heart has been damaged by the heart attack and try to treat it then. So that's the same principle we're doing with Alzheimer's.
You're at a point probably where you could comfortably retire. Does the brain still hold the fascination for you that it did when you first got into this field?
It does, and I very much enjoy working. And we're at Washington University. The Knight Alzheimer's Disease Research Center is a tremendous group of talented faculty and staff and very committed volunteers. It's a pleasure to go to work every day, and we're all united in trying to get truly effective therapies for this terrible disease.
Okay. Dr. John Morse from Washington University School of Medicine, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.